What were some of the biggest changes that you've seen from when you first started in this industry then to now?
There's been technical differences, but I think when you get far enough away, it's still the same. Every industry that I get close to, there's a few people who control everything.
You're listening to Studio 22.
Welcome to Studio 22. I'm your host, Will Meldman, here with my amazing co-host, Brock O'Hearn. We have an incredible guest today. Honestly, we could do weeks of material with him and still not touch on every celebrity he's met, every life he's changed, and all the amazing things he's done. And it's an honor to be sharing some airspace with him. He started off in LA around Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, managing Alice Cooper, Pink Floyd. You know, I mean, it literally goes on and on. He won Cannes Film Festival as a producer in 1977 with a film called The Duelist, which was Ridley Scott's directorial debut. Then he went on to produce 35 more films independently with his production company, Island Alive. He put in place the first female executive in Hollywood that could greenlight their own films back in the 70s. I mean, on and on and on. Brock, let's keep going.
I mean, like you said, we could be here for weeks. Shep also created a category for celebrity chefs. Like nobody else had thought of anything like that. And he put people on the map like Emeril, Nobu, Wolfgang Puck, to name a few, if you guys have heard of them. Anybody who's a celebrity chef to this day is thanks to Shep Gordon. His stories are just endless. And if you've seen his documentary, which was directed by Mike Myers, Supermensch, it touches on his incredible life. He has to be one of the most interesting people alive, one of the most creative, talented, innovative experts in marketing that has ever walked the face of the earth. This guy is an absolute legend. It is an honor among honors to have him on, and we couldn't be more excited.
Ladies and gentlemen, Shep Gordon.
Hello, good to see you both again.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. And I just want to lead off by saying I wish I was born in the 50s or 60s and met you then. You've had an awesome life, man.
Yeah, it's been a lucky journey. But, you know, I think you look at so many people from my era, and I still get together with about 30 guys from my fraternity. And it just seemed like the paths were so much easier. You know, I have friends who have accomplished such great things in their lives. Like one guy's an elementary school principal. One guy defended Chicago 5. You know, people who led really complete lives. Like mine happens to be in the show business world, so it gets more attention and glitter. But you know, I think that was an amazing time. It was. Most of us came out of a period of time when we demonstrated against the Vietnamese War, and we felt like we ended it. So we were a generation at like 17 or 18 or 19 who had, you know, gone in the streets and burned draft cards, and it worked. It's not like today where, you know, March for Our Lives and they still have the guns. So I think we all came away with that thing of we can do it. We can actually do it. And my life has been really lucky because whenever I would get next to something that was attractive to me, instead of backing off and saying I'm not worthy, I still had that spirit in me. I could do it. Come on, here we go. So it just opened up all these great avenues. When I look around, I see people my age who had the advantage of resources and parents who cared. The paths were it was more open. I don't know what the difference is, but I can see how frustrating it is now for kids who want to do stuff. You know, I lived through that March for Our Lives, not to get on a whole political journey, but how frustrating that had to be for all these kids who poured their heart into it and got nothing in return. So
I honestly think that's like a super relevant point to one of the first questions as well, because you have a documentary called Supermensch, you know, directed by Mike Myers, and I think it's almost like a great blueprint of a lot of, your career and your life and some of the things that drive you. And, early on, you mentioned how you applied and passed the exam to be a probationary officer, and that didn't really work out. And then you moved to LA. But did that kind of demonstrate or stem from, you wanting to help others and kind of, which eventually kind of became your career of management, right? Was that the genesis behind that?
100%. I had this, it was right at the time in my life when I started experimenting with drugs. So my mind was really opening up, and I sort of had this ridiculous image from a young age of a white knight on horseback coming in to save the day. And when I had seen on the news kids up against the wall, long-haired people like me in Sunset Strip. It was during the Reagan era. And realized a lot of them were going to jail. When they said probation officer, I said, I can get on my white horse and save the day. And that was sort of my image when I went out there. I was very naive. The job lasted one day because obviously I spent the day. But yeah, that was the thought process. I've always, but again, I think a lot of that goes back to our generation. And I come from a Jewish background where our families were wiped out in concentration camps. So we were acutely aware of the fact that you're going to die. At some point, you better get on your stick and get some shit done. Which drove me onto it. And that's always been the driving influence for my life, is to not just do commerce, but have commerce really affect and help people's lives. That was always my driving influence. It was maybe instilled from my grandmother or my dad or something, but that's what made me feel good. Cashing the check was okay, but like changing someone's life was when I would give myself a high five.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. Yeah, I know it's a very different time now, and being younger, I only have the perspective I have now. I can't go back to the 60s and 70s, right? So I don't really have much to compare to. But I feel like the pandemic for us, for me at least, was a reset in what my priorities and my what I valued. It's like I was working, and I kept pushing for that. But then when it stopped and it paused, it gave me a chance to look at myself and be like, well, everything I do, whether it's in entertainment, with acting, producing with Will, this podcast, it is exactly what you're saying, where we want to serve people, we want to entertain people, we want to help people, whether that's with the audience that we can garner and do things. And so pulling back, it's like, I love that mentality of what you're saying, in the sense that it's about the journey, it's about serving people. And it's like now.
That's well put, really well put. I did a thing this week for the Hawaii state government. They're trying to build a thing called Hawaii brand to be able to export things from Hawaii. And one of the businessmen asked me a question about how depressing it was in Hawaii. It was really hard to expand to international markets. And look at our entertainers; it's hard for them to get a global market. And my answer to him was basically, you are going to die. It's not just about being the biggest thing in the world. What makes you happy? You won the game. You're in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Everybody in the mainland's going to work 60 hours a week so they could come for the last 10 years of their life to be in Hawaii. So don't look at that as a negative. Look at it as a positive, and then build from there. Okay, what do I have to do to make my life better and happier, and not be the biggest thing in the world? You don't have to be the biggest maker of tea in the world. You can have a nice living, have a family, have a great life. So it is about the journey. I think it's really hard when you're young to understand that.
We always are looking forward, literally looking forward to things that we can accomplish and do, where we want to be in our careers, and we talk about this a lot. But it's when you're able to sit down and just be present and be grateful for what's happening right now in this moment. Like you're saying, I've got a lot of friends that, and I've adopted this as well, as someone asks you how your day is and say, well, it's great because I woke up, I'm alive. I think that's something that we are realizing more as we move forward. But, again, the journey and the experience is you might not, like for me, if I don't get to that A-list level that I've envisioned since I was a little kid, right? I'm still happy doing exactly what I want to do every single day. I love the people I surround myself with. Yeah, man. And it's like,
what is A-list?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe what is it?
Stedman gave me the Eckhart Tolle, the New Earth, actually out in Maui, and I got "Love and Do What You Will," the St. Augustine quote, right here on my arm. It was maybe like my third tattoo because it meant the most to me of like, love and do what you will, right? Like let that guide you. And I thought it was such a beautiful, simple way of putting it.
I always say, forgive them, Lord. Forgive them, Lord. They don't know what they do. Rather than get angry or just...
Yeah.
But I was going to say, I have a really simple practice, and it's funny you say Stedman, because I rarely evoke Oprah's name, but I read in her interview once, she does exactly the same thing. I wake up every day, and it's a practice. And first thing I do is I say thank you a bunch of times before I get out of bed, before I do anything, even if I feel miserable. The days you wake up with a cold, days you don't want it. But the first thing I've forced myself to do is just say thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't even direct it at anything. And it just sets a harmonic for the day. And then I read an Oprah thing, and she said that does exactly the same thing. She wakes up in the morning and says thank you and talks, thinks about what she's thankful for that day.
So, I mean, I was kind of jumping ahead here, but it's a perfect time to ask about it. Like, did a lot of that come from, your time with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and being around him? And
yeah, I would say it started mostly with a chef, Roger Verge. My dad died young when I was young, and I think I was always looking for a replacement, someone to mentor me, someone I could follow, and I got very successful very young, like way too successful, way too young, and had the Rolls Royce, the nightclub, married to a playmate, pinky rings. I was rocking. I could, they'd park my car in the front of every place, and I'd get pissed. All those stupid little things.
Yeah.
But every second of those days were unbelievable. I had beautiful women and things and books, and everyone's telling me how great I am. But in my world, I had a lot of my relationships die at 28. Janice, Jim, I could see where I was headed, but I didn't know how. I couldn't find like a rescue rope, and I was having a great time. So you put those two together, hard to find a way out, and you're having a good time. So I did my first movie. I got really lucky. I won the Cannes Film Festival. It was a movie called The Duelist, Ridley Scott's first movie.
Which is amazing, by the way. Like Ridley Scott obviously went on to do amazing things, and the fact that you did that with him first is so legendary.
I don't think we did. We blindly sort of just tripped into it. We had no idea. We got lucky. And they took me up to a restaurant called the Moulin, Paramount Pictures we did it for. And with this celebration dinner was at this place, the Moulin, because it was a Cannes Film Festival, filled with stars. James Coburn, Anthony Quinn, all my heroes. I remember I was so sweaty being in the room with my sport jacket.
Oh, man.
Wearing a green suit. I never wore a green suit again.
C'est la vie.
I've been there.
And I could see, here was this room of unbelievably successful people. And my heroes. In those days, you could still smoke, and a lot of them were smoking. And knees were bumping up and down. And everybody was looking at everybody else's table. And then this guy, older gentleman in a white uniform, walked into the room, and there was a hush. And James Coburn jumped up, and Anthony Quinn, they all jumped up to hug him. Barbara Streisand, Pavarotti, they're waiting in line to hug him. And, when in life, you get to know who the power people are in a room. And you could see he was, and I said, holy shit, who is he? He's the power guy to all my heroes. I want to be him. And he was smiling the whole time, and he was calm. And I said, that's what I want to be. I don't want to be in the shadows and calm. I'd like to be center stage, the guy everybody wants to hug, but not be coked up and not be crazed and not be, on this treadmill I'm on. So I asked him if I could hang out with him. And he had no idea what I was talking about, but he was very gracious. And I ended up spending the next 20, 25 years traveling with him and being his grasshopper, I always called myself, from the Kung Fu show.
Yeah.
And then when I met, I got really lucky. I was living with Sharon Stone. She took me to see the Dalai Lama, who I didn't really even know who it was, in LA at a speech. And we got backstage because I was with her, and he walked in the room, and it was exactly like when Chef Verge walked in the room, maybe even stronger. I remember turning to Sharon and I said, I feel like I just had the best shower of my entire life. Wow. And he just walked in the room. I haven't even talked to him, but I felt so clean and so like covered in white light. The only time I had ever had that before was when I met Berger. So I did the same thing. I found a way I offered my services as a cook, and the Tibetans never say no, so they accepted it. And I traveled with them cooking for him. And him and Berger was so similar in their approach to life. So although they never said to say thank you in the morning, I'm sure that's the way they both woke up. They both had exactly the same breakfast, which is so bizarre.
Wow.
2 eggs for easy, crisp bacon, whole wheat toast. The same exact breakfast. It's the weirdest.
Sounds pretty good.
That is insane.
Really weird, like weird.
Yeah.
And so that's a long answer to a short question. But
no, I love it.
Yeah, I love that too. And since I was young, I've always gravitated towards like self-help books and different stuff in that, because what I've learned is, and you hear this a lot, is success leaves clues. Well, it's funny you're saying these guys have the same breakfast, you have the same good morning routine to a degree as Oprah, and like, but hearing those kind of things, it's like, I've always gravitated towards people like that as well, in the sense of, what can I learn from you that I can adopt to my life and make my life better? So my question with that is, how important is it for someone to find a mentor in their life?
I think maybe the most important. I think when I look back and I see the people who, your dad's a perfect example with Jerry Weintraub. It's a perfect example. You can see Jerry coming through him. You see when he talks about him. He made his life complete. So I think it's really important, and I think that's what I would advise. Whenever I do these talks, I advise young people people who if you choose the right mentor, they want people to ask them for help. You're not being an imposition. Everyone has an ego. And if you can download to somebody who you like your war stories and all that stuff, it's a win-win. I love telling my stories. I do it. I just love it. It brings back great memories. It makes me feel good. And I know I'm passing, and I always try and put a slant on the story that has something they can take away. I think one of my favorite moments in my journey with my two mentors, that for me was one of the big takeaways. And neither one of them ever acted as a mentor or said to me, this is what you should do. There was never any of that at all. I don't think either of them even knew that that's what I was looking for. But when I with Mr. Verge, after 5 or 6 years, we've become really good friends. He would come to America and do engagements, and I would go with him. And he'd always book the restaurant. We'd go to dinner after his engagement. And one night we went to the restaurant, and something had happened. They had like a refrigeration breakdown, and we couldn't have dinner. So we walked a couple of blocks away, and there was another restaurant, and we went in blind. But the maitre d' recognized Mr. Verge. You could see there was a little bit of hustle going on. We got our table. The meal came. And I didn't really enjoy my whatever I ordered. I didn't enjoy it, so I had about half on my plate. He ate everything on his plate, and then he took my plate and finished it. And when we walked outside, I said, Mr. Verge, what did you find in that you made you even finish my plate? Because I couldn't find anything in there. And he said, oh, Shep, it was horrible. And I said, horrible? I said, horrible. Why did you finish the plate? And he said, you know, Shep, I didn't wake up this morning to ruin a chef's life. And I know the chef is waiting behind the door to see when the plates come back, did I eat or not? And if the plate's empty, he's happy. And if the plate's full, he's sad. I can have a bad meal, but I don't want to make anybody unhappy. And that for me was such a defining moment of realizing that your things have real actions. It's like putting a pebble in a pool. They really have actions. And be a conscious human being. And I think to bring happiness to yourself, you have to really think through what the effect is of what you're doing, not just in that moment, but, you know, is this going to hurt somebody? Is this going to, and then you start to at least get to a place where it's much easier to look in a mirror and be happy about what you see. Yeah.
I have this saying that I've said for years now that I've adopted. And it's that I look at every step I take as an opportunity to do good. And when I think of that, it's exactly to your point of, you know, we all have stuff going on in our life. We all have things and people we look up to. Exactly. It is. And it's already hard enough. So my mentality has always been, if I can, help people, but if at the very least, try not to hurt them, right? Yeah, and it's exactly what you're saying, and you're only reaffirming that even more with everything that you're telling us. Is because, you know, you never know if it's going to be that one smile, that one holding the door, eating the chef's plate, you know, that goes on to yeah, and maybe that chef too, you know, instead of quitting or his life being ruined, he went off and actually became a even greater chef, you know. So
when I think about Mr. Verge and His Holiness, I get a visual. Remember Johnny Appleseed, the story of Johnny Appleseed, planting apple seeds and trees came up. So I think about that. They do it with smiles. They sort of go around, whoever they touch, they make a little happier. So they're sort of like, you know, Johnny Appleseeds of emotions. But when you watch an audience, you watch someone in a Mr. Verge restaurant who was alive and the joy that they had of just being there. And the same thing with His Holiness. You go, you know, if you look at the audience in like Radio City Musical, it's 5,000 smiling, unbelievable faces. The thing that he used to do, which I love, and this is off topic, but he's so aware of how strong his presence is. Again, never discussed, but I spent enough time to see this. And what's really important to him is that no one considers him more important than them. Like, I remember someone asking him a question about why they should listen to him, and he just started giggling. He said, listen to me? You shouldn't listen to me. You have horrible life if you just listen to me. Listen to you.
Great advice. That's so funny.
But you could see when he realizes that every time he's in front of a new audience, they're in awe that like God walked in the room. And that's the last thing he wants to be, is godlike. So the first thing he always does is breaks it down in some comical way. So that would manifest, like we went to Trinidad. And in Trinidad, one of the things that's really unique about Trinidad is everybody wears the garb from their countries. It's never assimilated. The Africans, the South Americans, they still wear their traditional celebratory clothes. And they all get along great. There's no hostility in Trinidad. And at the airport, there's a 1,200-seat conference theater. So we landed in Trinidad, and he was meeting the hoi polloi of Trinidad at the airport. And they're all dressed in their, you know, African garb, South American, beautiful colors, greens and purples and orange. And but you could see there, like you could hear a pin drop. The door opens. It's like God had walked in the room, and they were all like, and he walks in and looks at, oh, must be in the wrong room. This costume party? There was a minute where everybody went like, and then they started laughing, and then he looked down because he's in his orange robes, and he said, oh, no, I dressed perfect for costume party. That was
That's
it. Now
so
he's a
great.
human. Now he's a human being, and off we go.
So great.
And I think comedy is such a good way of doing that, right? Because
Does that every time. That's his.
It's so perfect, right? Because you can be very, almost self-deprecating instead of making fun of someone else. You're kind of poking fun at yourself, and then everyone can relate to that. And I mean, man, you had a really insightful quote in the documentary as well that I'd love to kind of discuss with your music management. I'd love to kind of go over how you got into it, because it's such a unique story. And then, you mentioned how, and you kind of touched on it earlier, how people at the top in music kind of almost, I don't want to use the word suffer, but like have the most negative stuff around them and the hardest things to cope with, right? And it's like, do you still think that's around today in entertainment? Because it is, I think, such a serious topic that we don't really address in society a lot. It's just kind of like entertainers entertain, and, we don't really focus about the negative effects around them.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really complicated issue that's way beyond my pay scale. But in the live entertainment world, I think the thing that I've seen that's most dangerous is anything in the entertainment world deals with rejection. Rejection over and over and over, whether it's music, whether it's film. So you have to have a really strong reason and desire to continue. It's not normal to get rejected, and come back. In the live entertainment world, from what I've seen, it's a lot of, when you don't have great self-worth, you have this hole in your stomach, and you may think that 50,000 people applauding will fill up that hole, but it doesn't. So when you get to that place where you've now achieved what you think is going to make you happy, and it doesn't, that's when you go to crutches. And when you go to those crutches heavily, you start to hurt yourself. So that I see that, but I think, it's it applies to almost anything. Too successful in anything, too beautiful, too successful, they're all burdens. Not to say they're not desirable or unwanted, but they're burdens. They bring an energy. If you're a star, it brings an energy that's, especially if you're, how would I say this, underdeveloped consciously. So
Yes.
if you can't get to the point of being grateful for someone running after you in a restaurant and realizing that, wait a second, if they don't run after me, I probably have to sell my house.
Yeah.
But if you can't get to that place, then it's really, you guys live in that world too, so you see it. The one get bigger and bigger, and it just get, it's like,
Right.
instead of, wow, how lucky am I?
I appreciate the insight on that.
Yeah, we did a podcast with Tommy Armour III, and he said it's when they stop calling. That's when you got
They stop calling.
Oh yeah.
I love him. He's great.
He's great, man.
One of the best.
My first set of golf clubs were Tommy Armour golf clubs. His dad.
Oh, no way.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. Yeah, Will just played the members tournament with him, so we spent the week with him.
You guys win?
Oh, no.
I heard Tommy won something. I didn't know if it was that one. He was out for a while, wasn't he? He had a back or something. Yeah.
100% exactly right. He was coming off a shoulder surgery. Exactly. No, absolutely.
What would you say some of the biggest changes from when you first started in this industry? And I found that there's a lot of similarities between musicians and actors and those two industries. What were some of the biggest changes that you've seen since then to now?
I mean, there's been technical differences. You know, whether you go to see the movie at a theater, whether you go to see it or you see it at home, technical differences in pay scale before you could, you know, but I think when you get far enough away, it's still the same. So I think every industry that I get close to, there's a few people who control everything. So I don't think that's really changed. You know, artists will find a way to sort of sneak through cracks. But it's still, you know, my day was Paul Drew, who programmed RKO radio stations. If you got Paul Drew, you had a hit record. Yeah. Now it's Spotify or one of those things. I don't even know what it is. You get a hit, you got it. So the game has changed, but it's still, it's the gateway to success is pretty much still controlled. You know, it might be Netflix now instead of Paramount Pictures, but it's still people sitting in a room somewhere that usually don't have anything to do with the actual making of the content who really decide the future of everybody. And I can't say that's good or bad. I'm not making a value judgment on it, but it just seems to be the same thing. It's just new faces, new names, you know. Different agencies are powerful, different, you know, MGM is now Amazon. But it's the same basic thing. I think one of the frustrations and one of the classic fights has always been art against commerce. And it really displays itself heavily in the entertainment world because people care so much about it. So, you know, as a 77-year-old content provider, it's so frustrating at times to have to go through those systems.
Yeah.
Right.
I know everybody talks about how it's opening up, but it has only seemed to me, and I could be wrong, it's opened up to different people doing the same things.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue, you know, we definitely need more people like you out there. I mean, some of your business practices are built on kind of smashing down the gatekeepers, right? I mean, you talk about inventing the new category of a celebrity chef, right?
Yeah, no, that's always, I found that that's something I could actually do. Some kind of, you know, I'm not a trained anything. And I'm not a great business person. That you can find much better people who can squeeze more money out of stuff than me. But what I'm really good at is getting something to the public, you know, and so that's, I forgot where this started, but
no, yeah, it kind of about the industry and then kind of smashing down the gatekeepers. And
I made after The Duelist, my second movie was called Endangered Species. And The Duelist was very bizarre. There was a guy named David Picker at the head of the studio. There was a girl whose baby had died of crib death, who myself and David David Putnam wanted to do something for. So Paramount gave us $1 million, go make a picture. We don't care what it is. So I thought that's the way the movie business was. And the second movie we did, there was a phenomenon happening back in the 60s of mutilated cows being found in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
It was a big story. Went on for a year, 2 years. It'd be a nice, you know, 3 cows here, 4 there, but weird, like with holes and no insides. And, you know, there were stories about it coming from outer space. And
yeah.
Like a Skinwalker Ranch nowadays, there's a thing called Skinwalker Ranch, same type of thing in, believe Montana. But
this is in Colorado. So we sent some investigative reporters and a filmmaker named Alan Rudolph, who came out of the, I forgot the director's camp, but we did a lot of movies with Alan. He was on it. And we discovered that it was actually biological warfare testing by the government.
No way.
And we made a script out of it and sold it to MGM. But MGM bought it, and it was my first time sitting in those rooms with like 20 people determining what the movie's going to be. And so they said, we'll make this movie, but our main reason to make it is we have a TV star, Robert Urich, and we want to make him a leading man. So if he's the leading man, okay. So it's maybe the second day of shooting. And the scene is a night scene. Our Robert Urich character here's the helicopter coming. He's trying to investigate what's going on. So he takes a bamboo pole and he dives in a swamp, holding the bamboo pole up, breathing till the helicopter goes past them so they don't find them. And they shut us down, shut the movie down. And I wasn't there. Alan called me up. He said, they shut us down today. And my partner, Karen, I said, why'd they shut you down? They said, well, when he comes up from the swamp, his hair's not parted. And they want a leading man at all times. And a leading man always looks good. And they shut us down till we put a part in his hair, for real.
That's
wow.
I turned to my friend. I thought, I'm never doing another picture at a studio in my lifetime, ever. Never. Started an independent film company that we did our own financing. We did our own distribution. I made 35 more movies. I never talked to a studio. There was never a committee. We didn't have a committee at Island Life. We didn't have enough employees to have a committee.
couldn't fill it up.
That's great.
We made great product. We made Sam Shepard's only 2 movies that he directed. We made Koyaanisqatsi, which was a milestone, Kiss of the Spider Woman. I mean, we made some great product by letting the directors do what they do.
And was that with the Wes Craven and John Carpenter stuff? Was that during that time period?
Yeah. So now I had started to learn enough about the business to understand that none of the content providers had any freedom. We were really a remarkable little corner, but nobody came to see our movies. Stop Making Sense did $800,000. I think our biggest movie was Kiss of the Spider Woman, maybe did $3 or $4 million. So we needed to make money. So I went to the head of William Morris at the time, Jim Wyatt, and I said, is there a genre of movie that makes the biggest multiple of investment? I can't invest a lot. And he said, horror movies.
Yeah.
Who are the biggest horror movie directors? And he said, Wes Craven, John Carpenter. And I happen to represent him. I said, can you get me a meeting?
Amazing.
So he got me a meeting with each of them. And I went in and I said, listen, I have this little film. And everybody loved my film company. We were like the gem of the business. Nobody knew we didn't make a penny. But we were making gems. We won a couple of Academy Awards. I mean, they were gems. And we were the only one. There was no Miramax. There was no other independent company. Cinecom was sort of trying. So I said, listen, we have a different way of making movies. I would love to make movies with you guys. Here's my requirements. 1, you can't ever give me a script. 2, you can't tell me what the title is. 3, I never want to see a budget. Ever. 4, I give you $3 million. You come back to me 12 months later with a movie. I don't care if you spend $1. I don't care if you spend $3 million. The only thing I ask for is your name above the title. Wes Craven presents, John Carpenter presents. You want to spend $1 and fuck up your name?
Right.
I'm going to preach it. So I don't give a fuck what you do. And well, you're kidding me. I won't have to go to meetings. I won't get script notes. I said, there's nobody to read script notes. We don't want script notes. And that's how it came about. I got 4 pictures with each of them.
Wow.
It's a creator's dream.
And luckily, the lawyer who put it together for me, who had represented Island Live and made the deal for me with Tom Pollock. And he went to become chairman of Universal. And his first day at Universal, he called up and he said, I got to buy those movies from you. What do you want? I'll give you guys a couple of million of profit. I just want the movies. I said, but you can't, no scripts, no, I said, nothing at all. You deliver it in a suitcase. And so we didn't even have to distribute it. We actually got a real distributor, which was great.
That's so cool. That's a dream right there.
Yeah. It just sounds like
but it was, again, it's like waking up and saying thank you. It's just common sense consciousness of what do they want? What do I want? How do I actually get both of us what we want? Instead of how do I beat this guy? Because that's what 99% of the business negotiations are. How do I outmaneuver him? How do I outsmart him? How do I out-trick him? Instead of how do I make his dream come true? But at the same time, make mine come true.
We need so much more of that, and so many, less films by committee nowadays, I feel like.
Yeah, it's just it just sounds like you're leading with the art, and I think it's probably similar with music too, the musicians, and then just putting them in the right place and kind of finding a way. But that's a win-win situation. That's
a win-win. It's great.
Yeah. And then, I've always had that mentality. I grew up with friends that were always trying to pull me down, and I realized as I kept losing friends, I got better ones, and I kept kind of making space for the good people. But it's the whole, exactly. Yeah. Who you surround yourself with.
Tell my kids all the time, all we have is time. That's all we got.
Yeah.
That's really the only real commodity we have. So,
it's true.
Pick your friends carefully, because at that part, that's all you got is time.
Yeah.
Better off be alone and read a book than be with some angry motherfucker who's
ruins your time.
How shitty this is and how stupid that is, and gossips, and I hate gossipers. It's like
negative energy.
Yeah,
just like positive energy is so contagious, right?
Yep.
And
really, much more contagious than positive energy. Much easier to put the one on the bummer.
100%.
It's like you're saying, those rejections too. You get that over and over and over again. Eventually, it's gonna
stay positive.
Exactly. Yeah. Or someone will give you 100.
I used to always try and really get them to practice the concept of, wow, I got rejected. I'm one closer to acceptance.
Yeah.
Rather than how shitty it was. No, man, I'm one closer. That's
the entire focus of an inventor. It's you're going to fail forward. You're going to learn from your failures and more intelligently begin again and grow and learn. And that's, I've done that with everything that I do. I feel like if you get good at failing, there's no way you're not going to have success.
Yeah.
But it's your time. It's your exactly what you're saying. It's your time that's most valuable. You can have all the money in the world, all the success, and you could be miserable, Yeah.
And it's great to have all the resources. I'm a big believer in resources. I'm not knocking that at all.
No, me neither.
Do it in a way that it doesn't have to be blood money. It can be joy money.
Yeah. There's enough for everybody.
Yeah.
Did you find that, like, managing different types of, I guess, entertainers, we can call as like a whole category, from, starting with Alice Cooper, and then, Groucho Marx, who's more comedy and kind of acting, and then, chefs, like what is kind of the difference of managing different types of entertainers?
For me, it was all absolutely the same. Groucho was very different because he was old and not workable and so well known that it was just a different game completely. I want an honor. Like, he used to always say, "You're Shep, my manager?" And I said, "Yeah, Groucho. Funny, you don't look like a crook." That was whenever we had like 1 or 2 people in a room, that was the first thing.
Dude, that's funny.
But it's about defining the brands, and then it's providing access to those brands for fans other than physically being with the person they're a fan of. So when it's a chef, it's frozen foods, it's books, it's TV shows. When it's an artist, it's records, it's concerts, it's building highways to get them to their audiences. at really defining the brand. And that manifests in doing, for me at least, my method was going out to the edge, but knowing why I'm going to the edge. And as a brand builder, for example, Teddy Pendergrass, we couldn't get any bigger in the Black women's world. Every Black woman in America came to the concerts, but I wanted to cross into the white world. And the strength of Teddy was sex, pure and simple, like sex. Pure, never sexiest guy ever. We had songs written to that, close the door, turn off the lights, all about Teddy singing to one woman, making love to her, even though there were 15,000 people in a hall. So how do we get the word out without being arrogant that this is like the Black Elvis? And we did concerts for women only. We decided, let's do concerts for women only across the country. And everybody, the lawyers were against it. The record company was against it. You're going to have civil rights lawsuits. And fuck them. So I said to Teddy, it's like a movie and a committee in a room. Fuck them. We're going to go do it. And it worked. And it really defined who he was and started to change the complexion of the audience. So I think, that's sort of what I try and do for all the artists. In the culinary world, the journey was a very different one because they didn't have any highways. They all had one restaurant. They didn't have multiple locations. They didn't make any money, but they had demand. People wanted to get to Spago. People wanted to go to the Cirque. They couldn't get in. So for me, it was getting the Food Network on the air, figuring out a way to do live events, getting Time Life. We did a series of videos with what Time Life was advertising on TV. We just tried to do everything that every other artist did. And so for me, it was really the same. Doesn't really matter if it was music or film, or it was establishing the brand of the artist and building a fence around them so that they could actually present their art, whether it was food or music or cinema, in the way they want to.
And from, for the audience out there, kind of as I watched the documentary, right, like this was, Teddy admitted that his former manager, had been, I want to be YouTube safe with the word, but, had been ended, unfortunately. And, you were basically kind of stuck with his acts on the, what was it called? The Chitlin circuit, right? And then you wanted to break him off that. So to get him more exposure and make him more successful. Is that correct?
Well, it was bigger than that. What existed in America in those days was this thing called the Chitlin circuit, and it was a collaboration of Black-owned radio stations, Black-owned promoters, and the record companies. And they had the artists convinced that they had to, like, you go to Cleveland, you had to go play for the Black radio station and the Black-owned promoter. But they didn't pay. But the record company forced you to go do it. So they would, they pay you 10 cents on the dollar, maybe. There was no honor, no anything. It just was part of it. And when you tried to break out of that, the few acts that had tried to break out of it, it got very ugly. Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, it got like my first move to try and get out of it. They picketed Radio City Music Hall for Teddy. We had like 1,000. Wow. Didn't want to cross the line. It was what they were doing to all the national companies. They were picketing McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and I didn't realize Teddy's manager had been killed. When I went to him and I told him, I said, I'm not going to put up with this shit. If you want to do it, you go on your own. I'm out. But if you want to tell these guys, go fuck yourself. He said, it's pretty dangerous. And I said, I don't really care. And he said, my last manager got shot to death. Whoops. Well, maybe. But I had a couple of guys in my office got pistol whipped. I had a gun put to my head. I mean, it was.
Oh, wow.
Because it was big economics. Think about.
And you were breaking barriers.
Yeah, they think about every black artist in America. You know, I think Diana Ross was one of the few acts who they let play for white promoters. But if you were anybody else, Earth, Wind, and Fire, who I worked with, they're in the same thing. So we broke it. We had the FBI who came in and protected us. And we did it. And once we broke the wall, it broke the wall for all the acts.
It's such an amazing thing to do.
Black Promoters Association even exists anymore. They were very well organized, which is fine if it's a win-win.
Right.
Yeah.
But when, it's what I'm talking about, just the names changed. It was a great organization. It looked great, Black Promoters Association, but they don't pay the artist. And that was the same thing that existed in the culinary world. None of the chefs got paid for anything other than in their own restaurants. So for me, it was, I knew how to do it. And I was hoping no one would pull guns in the culinary world, and they didn't. I had a lot of really angry promoters. When I got involved originally, it was in 92. And I went to my first event, and it was Taste of Chicago, 100,000 people, all the great chefs of Chicago. No stoves. Nobody was cooking. It was all in a hot things that they would pull out, cook somewhere else. And I said, don't you want to cook here? And they said, of course we want to cook here, but they told us we can't. So it's like, wow, someone wanted Alice Cooper to play, but they couldn't give us sound and lights. We have to play on like a dark stage. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I did a gigantic, what's now the South Beach Food and Wine Festival. I went to all the guys and I said, we're going to do a festival. We're going to have stoves. And the next guy calls up. If he doesn't give you a stove, send him a picture of us doing it with a stove when he tells you can't do it with an outdoor stove. And we did it. We had Nobu and Emeril and all the guys. 38 outdoor stoves and cooking pits and grills and changed that game around a little bit.
It's essentially, if you can name a celebrity chef, they were with Shep at the time. From, Emeril.
But basically what I did is I said, let's band together and just say no. Now just when you pick up the phone, say no, have them call me. So I needed everybody. And it was everybody. But they were making no money. And I did it pro bono because they weren't making anything. I think Wolf had made like $100,000 that year, and he was probably the highest paid guy in the country. And it's just 92. This is not that long ago.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I actually wanted to touch on, just for the listeners who may have not heard it yet, but your first 24 hours in LA.
I was a probation officer at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, about an hour outside of LA. Never been to LA. It didn't work out well. I resigned that night. Easier than getting killed.
Yeah.
There was nobody who wanted me there. I was a long hair, and the guards didn't want me, and the kids, because the guards didn't want me, had someone they could actually abuse. So I just got out, and it was late at night, and I drove in. For those of you who know LA, you take the Hollywood freeway. I got off at Highland, and if you're in the right lane, you have to turn right when you get to Franklin Avenue, which I didn't realize. There was no map stuff in those days. I thought I was going to Sunset Boulevard to go to the Strip, but I ended up in this right lane, and I had maybe $500 to my name. I had just quit this job in a really depressing way. I had no idea where my life was going. I had some LSD in my pocket, so I figured I was going to go to the Sunset Strip, take some LSD, and go to the place that got me to California, where I saw the kids up against the wall being held up by the police. So I make the right, and there's a motel sign, vacancy, and I need a place that night to sleep. So I pull in, and it was like $28 for the night or something I could afford. And it was right at the driveway. I found out in the morning next to the Magic Castle on Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
And I go upstairs, I take some psychedelics, and it was like Hotel California. It was a pool, 2-story motel around the pool. And I hear a girl screaming, maybe 1 a.m. I hear a girl screaming, and I see some bodies moving around. I just come from a jail. So my brain is, something wrong. I go downstairs, I separate them. And the girl punches me, so it cuts my lip a little bit. They were making love. So I go back up to my room, wake up in the morning, go to the pool, and I hear this girl. She could see my lip. Said, "You the guy I hit last night?" And I guess so. Yeah, like really awkward. And it was Janis Joplin. And she was sitting with Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison, and Creedence Clearwater was there that day, and Alvin Lee.
Wow.
Pretty wild. And I didn't have a job. I had been what Anthony Bourdain called me, a pharmaceutical salesman in college. So I looked at this group and I said, oh my God, as a pharmaceutical salesman, this is the best audience I could ever have in my life.
Right. Top musicians in the world.
Yeah, no. It's like, so I started to share my goods, selling them to them, and started to get friendly. And after maybe a month or two, I was sitting with the guys who became the closest to were the Chambers brothers. Lester and Willie Chambers became really close friends. And they were sitting with Hendrix, and they said, so what do you do for a living other than, sell the thing? And I said, don't know. And Jimmy said, you're Jewish. And I said, yeah. And he said, you should be a manager. And I said, what's a manager do? And he said, you look after the artist. And he said, sounds great. He turned to the Chambers brothers. He said, you still got those freaks from Phoenix in your basement? And Lester said, yeah. And turned out it was Alice Cooper. And they negotiated that I had to give Alice $10 a week to say I managed them. So I had a front for selling my drugs. That was what they were afraid to do. And that's how I got into the management. That started my journey. Alice says we met on a lie. I told him he was a manager. He told me he was a singer.
Oh, man. Oh, that's so funny.
And you two, you've been best friends basically since that day almost, right? Like
53 years or something.
That's really special.
All on a handshake.
That's amazing.
Yep.
That's amazing. That's where, I wish it was like that as more often nowadays than it used to be. Because you get my hand, it's as good as signing anything, and if not better, and it's not always that way in this industry.
But when I look back at my life, I probably would have done it differently in most cases and actually got the paper. Hard to be self-reflective, but I think it was over ego, over cockiness, because you deserve what you deserve. And a lot of times, if it's a handshake, it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to the place that I could take it. I know how to take a punch. Fuck them. We give them blood if they don't know. But I think when I look, if I had to do it all over with what I know, in most cases, I would ask for a paper, but one that was really fair and equitable.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that as well, because, like Brock and I obviously started a business venture in the podcast as very close friends. And we were doing a podcast with these big, really big, like some of the top YouTubers, Dude Perfect. And they were like, oh, you should probably never do business with your friends. And Brock and I looked at each other like, well, but we clearly defined what we're going to do together, like very early on, and, did the paperwork, made sure everything, because I think it's just about, like you're saying, having that clear vision early where this is what it is. We don't have to talk about it ever again. Let's go work our tails off and try to do the best we can.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I have 2 or 3 like Alice in my life that we've done, business for 40 years and it's worked, but I also have others. I have somewhere, people took left turns, or maybe I did. I don't know. But just, I think till I had a child, I didn't think about that. Now, having had a child, and I see what could have gone to him that's not going to. Like I'm big enough to take it, but not for my kid. So I think that's really what changed me. Is it's hard doing. once you do papers, you have to bring in lawyers. Once you bring in lawyers, it's a different world.
Yeah.
So it never to me was much the paper, it was about the lawyers.
Yeah.
So like
Get
that, they always, that it's saying marriage is grounds for divorce. In business, contract makes disputes.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm super interested. Like, I know, I believe, you and Mike Myers have become super close, and that's one of the reasons. Doing Wayne's World with Alice, and then doing the documentary together, and a lot of people refer to your house in Maui as like a very healing, positive place to be, and like could you what you can tell us, I guess, of like how have you developed such a unique place that so many people find like positive refuge in?
I always had the vision of, I think part of it's growing up, I never had people over. So I didn't have one of those houses where your friends came. Just never happened. I don't think it ever happened once growing up. So I always had a dream of having like a compound. I think my dream life is having a compound where there's a constant rotation of interesting new people who have actually affected our planet, who I could suck off of. And great meals, and no purpose other than the human fulfillment. And that's what I'm trying sort of do here. You don't wear your shoes at levels you're off. I only have round tables, so there's no one ever left out of a conversation.
Oh, wow.
Really important. I leave an empty chair. There's always 2 or 3 of the most powerful people, and everyone knows who they are at a dinner party. So I try and leave an empty chair at each table for them to move around, so everybody gets a taste of it. Not have to look over at the other. How come I'm not sitting with at the A table? So they all become A tables. I'm really conscious of trying to really make the play. And it's Maui, which is, and I've been really lucky to have a great circle of friends. I was gonna tell the Mike Myers thing, because I think it's sort of an important lesson for young people coming up. Because no matter, you want to try, when you have conversations like this, it almost becomes like I don't have to wipe my ass with toilet paper. I'm so pure. And none of that is real. At times you have to compromise stuff. You have to choose. Life's a bitch. You got to choose what's more important. Like Mike Myers one is for me a really classic example. Never met Mike, big fan of Mike. Got a phone call. They wanted Alice to do a song in Wayne's World. And in those, they wanted to do Schools Out in Wayne's World. In those days, the fastest path to radio play was being in a movie soundtrack. It was the Saturday Night Fevers, the Grease, the Kenny Loggins, the Rocky themes. If you were in a soundtrack, you got on radio. You may not have a hit, but at least you got it. You got on radio and had a chance to win. So when I got the call, fantastic soundtrack, but Schools Out was an old hit. I had a new single coming. I wanted to do the new single. I presented it to the studio. They went to Mike. Mike said, absolutely not. It's Schools Out. And they sent me the script. And it was only 12 or 13 seconds of the song. I mean, it was really fast. I remember in the movie, it's just really, Alice is playing live, but it's fast. It's like, I think it was 15 seconds. So I went to Alice and I said, listen, I'm going to do something that's out of character for me and you. You're going to have to take the heat because you're going to be there filming. I'm going to lie to these people. And I told them why. I said, I want to get the new single in the movie. If I tell them we're doing Schools Out, and then the night before, like at midnight, say, no, we're not, they won't have time to get anyone else.
Yeah.
They have to go along with us. But you're going to be treated like a piece of shit on the set. Everybody's going to hate you because they're going to think it came from you. but we got to do it. So I called the studio. They said, they called me back. Mike Myers wants to see you at 7. So I went into Mike and I told him the truth. I said, and he was freaking out. And I said, listen, I don't know if you guys told you, but what I told them was, we're going to do this new song and we're really sorry, but we'll give you schools out for free for the end credits. You don't have to pay us. You can use the whole thing, do anything you want to do with it. You get the fuck out of here. I don't fucking, you're like really uptight. And so he did it and did the song. It wasn't a hit, but we got on radio. And I always felt bad about it because I don't like doing that. But sometimes you got to, my fiduciary capacity as Alice's manager overrode my lying to Warner Brothers, who are the biggest scumbags in the world. They would lie to me in 1 second about anything. They would take my last crumb of food if I was starving to death. So maybe 2 years later, and I used to get the sheet from the Four Seasons of who was in the hotel. And I see Mike Myers is there under an alias. And it just so happened that night I was having a luau at my house with Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Whoopi Goldberg and a whole bunch of people. So I wrote up a note and I said, hi, my name's Shep Gordon. I don't know if you remember me. I'm the guy who fucked John Wayne's World. I said, I'm really sorry. I hope you understood why I did it. My responsibility was to Alice, not to you. And I'm really sorry. I usually don't do things like that. I hope you've gotten over it. I'd love to, do anything I can to make you feel better and let you know how bad we feel about it. I'm having this luau tonight with Stallone, and please come and join us. So he tells the story. He says, so I get this note from this fucking guy who I hate. And I know that he's lying because he's a fucking liar. He lied to me about Alice. Now he's trying to get me to come to his house, lying to me that Sylvester Stallone on just a fucking liar. He said, so I'm going to his house just to bust him. And he said, he made dinner reservations somewhere else. And he came over just to bust me that they weren't there. And there they were.
Oh my, that's amazing.
We had the luau, and I ended up, he drank a little, so I had a chance, he vented his frustrations, how pissed he was at me, but he admitted that it really didn't hurt the film and blah, blah, blah. And then he said that he was going through a really rough time. His dad had just passed, I think. He was going through a really rough time. And I said, why don't you come and hang out? I'll stay out of your way. You won't even see me. At that time, I had a house next door. And I said, this place is really healing. And he said, can I come for a day or two and get out of the hotel? I'm really weird about people. And I said, absolutely, just come on. You won't even know I'm next door. And which ended up different because I ended up cooking dinner for him every night. And he spent 35 days, 40 days.
Wow.
And it
That's
was just
incredible.
So I think the reason I tell that story for young people is always be honest. Sometimes you got to do things you don't want to do. But be honest about it. Don't make up stupid stories and lies and get in deep. If you're honest with people and your motives are really genuine, you can get through stuff. Honesty is a real key. No, we're all fucked, but not, humans are tough. So anyway, that's a story I like to tell because we've become such great friends. He certainly has changed my life. I mean, remarkable.
Yeah, I love that story and that lesson. It's tough when you're in those situations, but it's like the light of consciousness.
Hold it around square peg or whatever. You just, as hard as you try to make it all, and then you have to make a choice. Yeah. And I can't say that my choice was right or wrong, but it certainly was out of complete self-interest. But I didn't feel like I was hurting his movie. I made my own judgments for him, which right or wrong, and you move on.
The movie definitely ended up being a smashing success. That is for sure. That was like one of my favorites for sure growing up.
I think my favorite moment was I went to his apartment about halfway through because it was his movie. I had really nothing to do with it. He did them. It's all him. But I went to his apartment, and when you watch CSI and you go into a room and it's all pictures of the crime scene. My whole life was every room in his house. It was like
Oh, wow.
the house where I grew up, my aunt, my uncle, the rest of it was the weirdest thing.
That's me.
I don't know what you do with that.
That's so funny, dude.
I guess we can ask like a super selfish question to end. Like, what would your advice be to us with like a new podcast that, we're trying to get out there and have fun with? And yeah,
I don't know the world well enough. It seems like it's exploding.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Like exploding. And advertisers, I saw some statistics today that are really going to put some jet fuel under it about the impact of podcasts on consumers is so much bigger than network TV ads.
Yep.
It actually works. I remember when Tim Ferriss was the first guy that I don't know if you know him, but he started having products through the night. I said, wow, this is powerful stuff. But I think it's a lot of it is what I call guilt by association. The people you get to come on the show, the bigger the stars, the bigger the names. It's, leads people into it.
Like Anne Murray with the Hollywood vampires, right?
Exactly.
It's like, yeah.
But it
I
always
love that
works.
story.
It always works. The nice thing is 99% of these things take you on a historical journey of facts and explanations. Yours is you're getting to a much deeper place of motivation.
Yeah. That was our...
I think one of the statistics I fell across when I was doing something with Amazon was on audiobooks, how much is driven by topics having to do with mentorship. And the kind of questions at least with me, are those kind of fundamental things that come into play in mentorship. So I would highlight that a little because it seems like that's a real need of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
People really want to hear about mentoring, and that's a great topic because it brings, it gets you right down to the core of it person.
Exactly. And that was one of the initial conversations that me and Will decided to make this podcast. We were like, we don't want to do something that is going to paint anybody that we are grateful enough to have on the podcast in a negative light. And all of these people that we brought on, obviously yourself included, have such interesting, diverse lives and perspectives on lives and little moments, that they can share. And so, I feel that we're the biggest fans of our podcast because we get to actually take away from every single one of these,
Absolutely.
And it's been incredible so far. Yeah.
I think if for you, it's like a sponge, for your audience, it's like a sponge.
Exactly.
That if you give them one little nugget of stuff, if they can come, that's for me, it's little nuggets of a 77-year, like that one nugget of the plate being eaten by Berger.
Yep.
It's a turning point in my whole life.
You said it earlier in the podcast, and it's the first time I've ever heard somebody else say it, but I always call them defining moments in my life where those little nuggets, exactly, it's like a computer program or whatever, you take one of those nuggets and replace one of the old ones, and then you have your new formula that you've written, and that's kind of how I choose to show up, is like, let me take those good little things and memories and life.
You should check out for your podcast, completely off the wall. His name is James Doty.
James Doty.
Doty. Google him, and then get his book. He has a biography, and then you'll love him for the show. It's so great. It's like so great. He's one of the world's leading doctors. He's like,
oh wow.
But he, when he was a young kid, he tripped over a magic store, and someone in the magic store mentored him.
Wow.
And he tells the story as well as I've ever. I mean, it's really inspirational. And he has his own podcast. I did his podcast.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, cool. We'll check out the episode.
He would be a great guest for you. Especially in that corner.
Yeah.
Because he's got a really unique, beautiful story. And he tells it beautifully.
That's awesome. Well,
I got to go to my next one.
Yeah, man.
Shep, thank you so much.
Hey, you too. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you for watching Studio 22.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And follow our socials at Studio 22 Podcast.